Hi there, this is Helen Tarrant, and if you're wondering how you can use $100,000 and achieve passive income through property and also continue to grow your property portfolio, listen to this video. Now, a lot of people talk about investing 100K into residential in some regional area. They buy something under 500K and wow, it's gone up by 10% because they've made $30,000. Well, where is that $30,000 really going to get you, right? Look, when the interest rate was at 3% and you are able to get maybe 5% gross and you get $30,000, the bank is going to allow you to go and buy again, right? The reality is today they're not going to let you because the servicing mark is so high. The benchmark for servicing on a 7% interest rate when you try to pull out that 30,000 isn't going to be worth it, right? And most people have started on fixed rate, hasn't come off it, and you can't refinance, so your equity is stuck. So what do you do if you have $100,000 and you desperately want something different from your residential property and you're thinking maybe commercial property is the way? What is the best way forward? Now, my name is Helen Tarrant. I help everyday Australians become wealthy and financially independent and financially free through investing in commercial property, and I'm teaching them how to invest with confidence and security, and also through my specialist buyers agency help them to secure the right property based on strategy, not just on a whim. And that's the most important thing we're going to talk about, is that 100K requires strategic planning, and that you're just going off walking into buyers agency office or looking at some online stuff or even watching this video is not going to secure you the financial freedom that you need. What you do need is actually a plan. So how do you make the 100K into 200K to 500K? Now, the key to that is actually commercial property flipping. Now, I've got specialist workshops on this, and it is really one of the programs that we offer to help our clients move up the ladder. But one of the things that you're constricted with when you have 100,000 is more and more deposit. Now, if you put that into a high cash flow, so high yielding commercial property, what you're going to find is that that property is going to be in regional Australia. It's going to be somewhere around Mackay, somewhere around Cairns, somewhere maybe into inland, into Emerald, or into areas of Rockhampton. Now, great, you're going to get 8% potentially, but the thing is you are not going to get enough cash flow that is going to save you or let you save up for the next deposit. And the growth in these areas are not going to be strong enough for you to get to refinance in the next 2 years to allow you to go again to pull out that 100K. Now, 100K is pretty small in the commercial property arena. Remember, in the commercial property arena, most people, when they're investing in commercial property, have $500, $1 million to invest. So when you're trying to start out with 100K, one of the options is really to do joint ventures with other people so that you can actually grow that. Secondarily, the best way forward is actually to take the 100K and say, well, I may be able to use 80K of that as my deposit, as my investment, and use the other 20K to create some cosmetic uplift on the property. Now, that 80K, if you can borrow up to 80% LVR, now that's if you are low income, that is if you are able to access a low doc commercial property loan. If you are, then your $80,000 will allow you to buy something around maybe $300 to $400 mark, $100,000 mark. But if you can't, then you have to rely on your full doc loans or lease doc loans. Then you need to make sure that you're really only buying around 150 to 200K. So what do you do? Now, the most important thing here is about increasing rent, right? So what does that mean? That means you can go to a fairly regional area like where you're going to be inland, so regional Victoria, regional New South Wales, and regional Queensland, where the population is going to be around 20,000 people or so, maybe even less. So areas like Roma, right? Areas like further out into like Junee, maybe along the Great Ocean Road, past Warrnambool, into all those smaller areas. Those areas are really going to be the areas that you can probably pick up something relatively cheap. So instead of in Townsville, you go to Ayr. Instead of Townsville, you might go to Charters Towers. Areas like, instead of Mackay, you might go to Serena. Areas like that, right? But the main thing is that what you're trying to achieve here is try to increase the rent so that you allow the increase of $50,000 more on the equity of the property. So you might buy in at about 200K, 250K at most with your deposit, and that property is going to have a tenant in there. The tenant may be on 1 or 2 year leases, and it may not be a significant lease or a brand name or an imported tenant, right? And what you want to do is tweak the property. Use your 20K, maybe add new air conditioning, maybe a paint job, maybe flooring, to help the tenant to stay on but pay a little bit higher in rent. As soon as they pay a little bit higher in rent, you can get a revaluation in the next 12 months. The increase of value on that property will happen. Then you can draw down on that equity and go again. But normally what people will do when they're doing an exercise like this is to actually sell the property so that they get their $80,000 back and their $20,000 they use for refurb plus another 50K. So now you've got 150K to start with instead of 100, and you gradually move up till you get about 300 to 500 500,000. So maybe in 3 or 4 projects, you start to build up a big enough deposit. Now you're really in the arena to play, right? Because that's where you're getting the maximum bang for your buck. Because when you're looking at commercial property investment, most people investing in commercial property are going to be the high net worth individuals who are actually looking at properties that are going to be, you know, $1 million to 1.5 million. So if you're doing an uplift, you need to have that 300,000 to 500,000 to be able to create that uplift into that price point so that these investors are buying. And you'll find that you get a much higher margin when you're in that price bracket. Now, doesn't mean you can't get started with 100K, but there's really only 2 ways. You joint venture with someone else, which I believe is a better option for you, or you actually then start out something really small. This might be a little strata shop, maybe in the ACT, in South Australia, maybe regional Victoria or Queensland, and you over a period of time, and that maybe over 12 months or maybe even 18 months, increase the rent, refurbish the property with the tenant in place so you can get a higher rent with the tenant in there, redo the lease, get a revaluation and pull out your money and do it again or sell it, right? Remember, the people who are buying your $250,000 property, which may become $300,000 or $350,000, are people who are going to use it to invest in their self-managed super fund. So for them, they will most likely buy it in cash because they've got the money in the super. They just want a stable tenant, stable long-term tenant that is going to be there for the long term. Now, I've got a classic example of this. One of the properties that I did when I first started out was I bought it for about $120,000 or so. So that was a really good start, but that was in Seymour in Victoria. And then it had an original fish and chip shop in it. It was underperforming. Over the time I held it, we changed it to other type of tenant. It became a gaming workshop tenant, and eventually I sold that for $250,000, right? Yes, that was a space of 4 years I ended up doing that, but I doubled the value of that property by changing the tenant. We did the same next door. We bought it for $150,000, ended up with a laundromat tenant, and ended up being able to sell that or get that revalued at about $300K. So you can do that on the lower end. You're going to find little pockets and little areas like your Wangaras, like your Seymours, that are able to give you little shop fronts that you can do this. They won't be big. They might be 50 to 70 or 80 square meters, and the rents are not going to be huge, but it is a great starter property. And that's how I really got started in some of the ways of improving uplifts and cash flow when I first started in commercial property, especially when I'm not sure about an area I want to dip my toe in. That's when I would start some on the lower end just to see if it works as well. So if this is a strategy you're looking for, or potentially you might have 250, 500,000 and you really want to build a portfolio in commercial property that is not dependent on you, because one of the big things is when you buy a residential property using the same 100K, what you're going to find is that property still requires money out of your pockets to support it, whereas the commercial property is self-sufficient from the time you have a tenant, and that could be day 1, day 6, it could be 6 months down the track, but eventually it's not forever negative. It is actually going to give you positive cash flow the moment you have a tenant, which is so much more important if you're trying to grow your portfolio faster, right? So if that's what you're looking to do, you're looking for a reliable team, someone to work with you in the long term to build you out a strategy, a portfolio, to get clarity on your next steps and how to build that portfolio through commercial property, reach out to myself and Unicorn Commercial Property, hit the subscribe button and the bell. Make sure you join us for one of our events, upcoming free live events or online events. Buy my book called Cashed Up Commercial Property, and make sure that you do follow us on subsequent videos because there is heaps to learn about commercial property, but also we're one of the founding members of the Commercial Property Investment Educators in Australia. I've been teaching this since 2016 and I'm always at the forefront of the market. So watch out for my next coming up videos on predictions in 2024 and how you should position yourself so you can really make that gain in 2024. Until next time, keep hunting and remember, we're creating wealth together.